Yeah, the blastocyst, the blastocyte, right? Yeah, okay. Some of the terminology is variable again on what groups of organisms, right? Blastula, right? Forming the blastula, okay? So the cleavage, so from the zygote, you're going through the process of cleavage, increasing cell density but not mass. Then the migrations, the cells migrate to the peripheries, forming the blastula. Now, what's inside the blastula? It is a space inside. Yeah, the blastocele, right? It's called the blastocele. So you're forming this hollow ball, right? So cleavage is ultimately giving rise to the blastula, right? It's not hollow in that we have void, vacant space. It's fluid filled, right? It's a fluid filled structure, okay? All right, then what happens to the blastula? What's the next thing?
Gastrulation.
Gastrulation. Okay. What happens with gastrulation? How would you describe the process of gastrulation? The blastula does what? Yeah, it caves in on itself, it indents, the fancy word is it forms an invagination, right? However you want to say it, okay? It is, right, projecting in on itself. Now, then there's a difference. What's the difference? The difference is between animal clades is how many tissue, right, layers that. So then, okay, so gastrulation, you could say, what is the product then of gastrulation in the diploblastic condition? Yeah, gastrulation gives rise to, how would you say? To what would you say? To what? Yeah, to the ectodermis and the endodermis in the diploblastic organisms, right? So you could also say, before you say that, you could say that gastrulation gives rise to two, what? Two germ layers, right? Two germ layers, or two germinal, germ for germinal, right? Germinal tissue layers, right? Because what are we talking about with gastrulation is the formation of true tissue types, okay? Coming from the ancestral condition, where the ancestral animal condition way back is actually not having tissues but cellular level of differentiation. Again, that's what we see in the peripherins, right? So what we're talking about right now doesn't apply to periphery, but rather is applying to the cnidarians, right? So gastrulation in the diploblastic condition gives rise to two germinal tissue layers. It's giving rise to the endodermis and the ectodermis, okay? I'm just looking at your notes right there. The pictures, right? If you want to include pictures in your description, that will also be fine, right? Okay, sometimes you can draw it, right? So, not just a picture with a description, right, about the process would also be fine, right? The whole point is that you are elucidating, you are making clear to me that you're understanding this developmental process, okay? I guess we could say, why is knowing this stuff important? Well, this is this embryonic data and this embryonic developmental pattern is how, before genome-wide sequencing and genetic sequencing has been used to parse apart all of the phylogenies, this is the information that biologists classically use to create these major groups of organisms, right? This was the initial, right, information that was used to separate these phylas into protostomic and deuterostomic lineage, okay? So that's there, all right, we're almost done. So that's the diploblastic condition, but there's another condition. What is it? Not diplo, but triploblastic. Good. So then the gastrulation in the triploblastic condition gives rise to not two, but three, or the extra one, the next one is the mesoderm. Exactly. Okay. All right. So if we were to do a quick compare and contrast, what's the difference? What are some differences between triplo and diploblastic organisms? The mesoderm, okay, there's one, that's important. Now what else does the mesoderm give rise to in not all, but many triploblastic organisms?
Muscle and many organ systems.
Yeah, muscles, organ systems, also what? Also something else.
Coelom.
The coelom, also the coelom, right? You can't be a coelomate organism if you are diploblastic, right? Because the coelom is formed by pockets of the mesoderm, okay? All right, and then very last thing on that question to also think about is further, if you're triploblastic, okay, there's differences in what's called what? The fate of the blastopore, right? So you could be a triploblastic organism, you're going through this gastrulation, forming the blastopore, but then we separate the triploblastics into, we mentioned this earlier, into the what lineages? The protostomic lineage and the deuterostomic lineage, where the protostomes are the mouth first, thus the mouth is derived from the blastopore, and then the deuterostomic lineages, it is the anus that is, exactly. So they're complete gutted organisms that have a mouth and an anus, but the blastopore is giving rise to separate things in those two lineages. Yeah.
The whole plastic organisms also have the blastopore?
It's generally referred to as an oral opening. It's not the same. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think even in your book it says mouth / anus, right? When with jellyfish and the medusa, they call it the oral surface and the aboral surface, and so I've always heard it and have seen it referred to as just an oral opening that functions as both a mouth and an anus. Is how it's just described. Yeah. So no, they don't. Right? It's not the same as the triploblastics.
That question's probably what, like 10 points?
Yeah, it probably is like 10 points. Yeah, right? Okay. Okay. So that's something we've talked about in lecture and in lab. What do you guys think? Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Does it make sense? Right? Yeah? Okay. If you have any questions too, you can send me a message on Canvas or something too, right? Over the weekend if you need to. Yeah. All right. Okay, so there's one. There's one of them. All right, now another one that is super important, right? How about you guys guess? Okay, I'll just say major. We could put there in big, bold, large letters, right? Major evolutionary innovation, adaptation within terrestrial vertebrates is the amniotic egg. Is the amniotic egg, right? Okay. It's not that I'm like, oh man, amniotic. It's just like, how important is the amniotic egg? And the answer is, it was extremely important. It was this extremely successful evolutionary innovation that really allowed for the diversification of terrestrial vertebrates, right? It's not, there's many things that have happened in evolutionary history, right, that have led to humans being here, one being the extinction of the dinosaurs, right? But even before that extinction event, we wouldn't be here as a clade if the amniotic egg never evolved, right? Right, because mammals, we are our own lineage of the amniotes, right? So the amniotic egg evolved early on, and there was an early split where mammals we have our own evolutionary history distinct from all other amniotes, right? Okay, so super, super, super important. Actually, the guy who taught me about the amniotic egg, when he got his PhD at UCLA, halfway through your PhD, you have to take a series of exams, right? To basically to prove your worth, right? To stay in the program, you have to do your research and your dissertation, and once you finish your coursework, you have to take an exam, and then you get you get CPhil instead of doctorate, so you're a candidate for a philosophy degree, right? A PhD. His exam was basically to argue the evolutionary significance of the amniotic egg, right? So here you go, you had UCLA saying, if you want a PhD, tell me about how important this adaptation is, right? Okay, so how about first, why was the amniotic egg important? That's an easy answer, actually, right?
Because it allowed organisms to get out of aquatic environments.
Yeah, but to free themselves specifically in what aspect of their biology?
Reproduction.
From reproduction, right, yeah, because you could argue, you had amphibians, right? You have adult amphibians that are terrestrial, right? Okay, they're getting all of their resources from the terrestrial environment, but reproduction is still tied to moisture, right? To water in some way, right? Once you've evolved the amniotic egg, you've freed yourself from that selective pressure, right? I don't need to worry about it being rainy, right? Doesn't matter if it rains or not, okay? I mean, it still does, because you still need water as an organ, but you know, you can still lay your eggs, right? Free, and separate from some sort of aquatic ecosystem or aquatic situation, right? So that's the benefit, right? Very obvious. Okay, all right, what does it mean to be an amniotic egg? An amniotic egg has what? Yeah, okay, the amniote. Before that, back it up. The amniote is one of four what? Okay, so what are the components of the amniotic egg? Yeah, the what's that? The yolk, the amnion, the chorion, and the allotose. So the yolk, the amnion, the chorion, and the allotose. Okay, those four things. There's actually one other part, right? But those four things, we can categorize them as what? What's the fifth thing?
The shell.
Not the shell. The placenta is a mammalian thing, so we'll get there. We're missing something really important. It's the embryo.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the embryo, right? Yeah, the embryo. Yeah, the embryo itself, okay? So you have the embryo itself, right? That's gonna be the organism, whatever it is, right? Those other four things are often referred to as what? Extra embryonic, one word. membranes. Extra embryonic membranes, okay? So, let's do a little compare and contrast here. Okay, so you have a frog. A frog lays an egg. Does a frog have at least one of those extra embryonic membranes? Which one? What does frog eggs have? Fish eggs have it too, right? They have a bird eggs have it too, right? Okay, they have a yolk. They have a yolk. Okay, so fish have a yolk. Amphibians have a yolk. What is the yolk? What is the function of the yolk?
Nutrition.
Nutrients, right? The embryo is developing. How is the embryo developing? It's getting energy. If it's a placental mammal, if it's us, well, it's getting it from mom, right? Okay, but if it's not, where is it getting it from? It's getting it from the yolk. Okay, all right. So those, they still have a yolk. Extra embryonic, and the other three are going to be again the amnion, the allotose, and the chorion. All right. Let's start with first the allotose. What is the function of the allotose? You'll write the allotose, whose function is gas exchange, right? Okay. Waste disposal, right? Okay. The chorion.
Protection.
Yeah, encases all other membranes and also functions in respiration, right? Gas exchange, right? Because it's covering everything else. And the amnion, which contains amniotic fluid, which functions to what? Everyone's whispering.
Sustain a sanitary environment.
Yeah. Sterile.
Sterile.
We'll say relative, we could say sterile, but if we want to put the little spin, relatively sterile. We used to think that in humans that in the amnion it was bacterial free, but I think data evidence is showing that there are some, but it's very, very low, right? So it is relatively sterile, right? It's a sterile, and then the other thing, yeah, moist. Another way to say it is aqueous, right? We say it's a sterile aqueous environment. Right? okay? So we don't have to lay eggs in the water, but you still can't have the embryo dry out, right? It has to be maintained in a fluid environment, right? In an aqueous environment. So that's the function of the amnion, okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? Right, so those are the 4 extra embryonic membranes, okay? Now, further, one last thing, all right? What's the placenta? How is it in placental mammals, us? We're amniotes, right? Okay? We have extra embryonic membranes, okay? Well, what does it mean to be a placental mammal? It means to what? The word I just said, placenta. All right, what part of the amniotic egg contributes to the placenta?
So you have the yolk and.
The yolk is not part of the placenta. The allotose is not part of the placenta. Therefore, it's not the amnion, right? It's not the amnion, because the amnion still encases the baby, right, in mom's uterus. I told you guys, when placental mammals give birth, right, the water breaks, right? A woman's water, what is that? It's the amniotic sac rupturing and an evacuation of the amniotic fluid. That has, not related to what we're talking about, but that has hormonal triggers that causes mom's brain to secrete oxytocin, which then starts ramping up uterine contractions, right? That's a signal that, all right, time to go, right? Time to go through uterine contractions, right? But, so then we have one left, what is it? Chorion, right? Okay, so in placental mammals, the chorion becomes you'll say, the embryo's contribution to the placenta. So the chorion is the embryo's contribution. You guys know what mom's contribution is? The uterus, the endometrium, the inside of the uterus, right? Yeah, the inside of the uterus. Okay. All right. What do you guys buy it? Is the amniotic egg important? Yeah, maybe just a little bit. Yeah, right. I can see those blank stares, right? But it's a big deal. We would argue. Okay. All right, a few other things. So let's keep going. Now again, just remember, I know you guys are writing all your notes. You can compile your answers probably over the weekend, so you have them right ready in your head to go. I don't need filler, right? You know, just tell me about it, get your point across, hit the marks, and we're good, you know, right? Okay. All right, I like the behavioral biology. I like altruism as a question. I think it's an interesting question. Okay. All right, so let's first just define altruism. What does it mean to exhibit an altruistic behavior? A sacrificial behavior, how would you model that in terms of, let's say, cost benefit? Who's benefiting and who's incurring a cost, right?
Incur the cost of benefit. Other companies.
Yeah, so maybe, right? So you're kind of getting ahead of yourself a little bit in that description. And then the answer to that would be, it depends, right? Okay, so we could say that, how about this? An altruistic behavior is a behavior that an individual organism exhibits, right? That benefits another, right, individual at a what? At a personal cost of fitness, right? So the individual organism that displays the altruistic behavior, whatever the behavior is, incurs a cost. So it's a cost to the performer and a benefit to the recipient, right? That's what it means to be altruistic. All right, now I gave you guys 2 models of altruism, right? What are the conditions, potentially, right? What are the behavioral, sociological conditions, environmental conditions that would select for altruistic behaviors, right, in animals, in these animals, right? So 2 models of altruism. What were the 2 models? Yes?
The vampire bats?
Yeah, what is that model called? The vampire bats is an example of this type of altruism. That model of altruism. What is it? Huh? Reciprocal altruism, right? So that's one model of altruism, right? Reciprocal altruism. Okay, we'll talk about the models in a second. What was the second model? Kin selection, yes, kin selection, right? So the 2 major models of altruism are kin selection and reciprocal altruism, okay? All right, let's first talk about kin selection, okay, as a model. All right, what did we say? Kin selection. I put up there Hamilton's rule, right? Derived from the work of George R. Price, right? Okay, with his tragic story. Okay, but Hamilton's rule states that an altruistic behavior will evolve if,
More closely related.
yeah, if the benefit B times R, which is, it was very simple, we could just summarize it. You guys go back to the slide, you'll see it too, right? Just said, I think it was lowercase, right? B times R has to be greater than C, right? So the benefit, yeah, right, so B is what kind of benefit are we talking about? We're talking about a fitness benefit, right? Times R, which was the,
Relationship.
yeah, the degree, say of relation, has to be greater than the,
Cost.
right, cost to the performer. Right? So, you exhibit an altruistic behavior. What was a classic example of an altruistic behavior that follows this model? Yeah, the meerkats is a great example. Meerkats are a great example. Squirrels, ground squirrels do it, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Yeah, what do they do? There's my meerkat example, right? You know squirrel's looking at you, not when it has its head pointing at you, but when its head's like cocked to the side, that's when you know the squirrel's looking at you, right? Okay, so the squirrel's looking at you. It's exhibiting what type of behavior? Yeah, it's a sentinel, it's exhibiting what we call vigilance behavior. It's being vigilant, right? You guys know what it's like to be vigilant, right? What that means? Yeah, if you're vigilant, you're watching, you're careful, right? Stay vigilant, you know, there's mountain lions here, whatever, you know. Keep a lookout, you know? Okay, so they're exhibiting vigilance behavior and alarm calling, ultimately, right? Okay, so what's the benefit? The benefit is, right, to the other members in the social group, they get to forage, right? They get to forage, they get to mate, they get to reproduce, they get to do all of their upkeep behaviors. If they're social, they get to groom, right, perhaps. They get to enforce social bonds, right? All that important stuff, okay? For social animals and especially social mammals, right? Okay? So if that benefit times the degree of relation is greater than the cost, let's focus on the cost in a kin selection model. What's the cost of that behavior? You're the sentinel. Here comes the hawk. Watch out, guys. Avian predator. What's the cost?
You're the one that's gonna be
You're the one that's most likely to be eaten, right? Because you're the one that's on the hill, on the little mound, going squeak, 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 right? Whatever the sound is, you know? You're the one that the predator's gonna focus on, right? You know? If you're walking down, you know, we do this stuff too, right? I mean, like you're walking down the street and somebody yells, you know, fire, right? You're gonna look at the guy who's yelling fire, right? You know, you're gonna look towards where the sound is going, okay? So they have an increased cost such that they are most likely the ones to be killed. All right, but why why do we see they do this is because who are they calling for? They're calling for who? Who are they warning? They're warning, we could say, as humans, right, they're family, right? They're, who are the individuals that we see are most likely to do this behavior? It's adult females, yeah, adult females are the ones that are most likely to call, right? And they disproportionately call more than, basically their demography, more than they occur within the population, right? So why? Why adult females? Because who are the other females? They are their what?
Sisters.
Their sisters,
Daughters.
their daughters, their aunts, right? Yeah, right, they tend to have these, right, sort of matrilineal groups, right? Okay, males tend to disperse out, that's why they don't do that, right? Okay, so because females are sharing relation, or have a higher probability to share relation, right, with all other members within the social group, okay? I'm sure you could take that and concise it, right, put it in a more concise answer, okay? But yeah, so that's kid selection, that's the one model. All right, now the second model we said that's exhibited by vampire bats was reciprocal altruism. What can we say about a reciprocal altruistic condition system?
It's when you expect something back.
Yeah, it's sort of this tit for tat kind of thing, right? I'll scratch your back right now, but when I need you, what are you gonna do? You're gonna scratch my back, right? I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back, right? Okay, so specifically in this type of altruistic model of reciprocation, one important way to say it is whether or not you reciprocate, right? Whether or not you are a quote unquote good actor, right, in the system is a better predictor on if another individual will be altruistic towards you than the degree of relationship, okay? So in these reciprocal altruistic systems, it's actually not the degree of relationship that's a predictor of reciprocation, it's how good of a player you are, right? How good of a reciprocator you are, okay? So there's a mechanism to defend against cheaters, right? So if you cheat the system, you get cut out, right? It doesn't matter that you're my brother, or you're my sister, or you're my mother, or you're my father, right? You cheated me, right? I gave you food when you were hungry. You didn't give me food when I was hungry, right? Therefore, I'm cutting you out of the system, right? Experimentation has showed this. So it's not the degree of relationship, right? You will be more altruistic with an unrelated individual as long as they keep reciprocating with you, right? And you'll cut out your direct family. Sounds like a lot of human families we know, huh? Right? Sounds like a lot of human families I know, right? Okay, but I'm just saying. So it's a reciprocal system, not a kin selective system, right? So again, reciprocal altruism is, and whether or not the individual will be altruistic is best predicted by whether or not you're a good actor, right? Are humans altruistic? I think we need to do that. This isn't on the exam, just think about it. Are humans altruistic?
Yeah.
It kind of depends on the day, right? Yeah. How about kin selection or reciprocal? A little bit of both, right? Humans will be both, right? You'll help out your family. Yeah, you're my brother. You're my sister. Oh, God, I got your back, right? Okay, right? But you can only take so much, right? Then you have narcissists. That's something else, right? But then, but at some point, you're like, I gotta cut this person out. I know they're my brother, but goddamn, right? They just take and take and take and take, and they don't give back. But if they kept giving, my best friend growing up, Steve over here, he's got my back. I know if I help him out with this car battery, when I need transmission fluid, he's got me on those things, right? Okay? So we do a little bit of both. Humans can be, I'll argue, both. We're probably the most altruistic species on the planet. At the same time, we are probably one of the worst, most horrible, evil species on the planet, right? If we're talking from a morality standpoint, right? We have done, some of the best things for other humans, and we have done, obviously, some of the worst things to other humans, right? Ranging from all the way to genocide. Alright, does anybody have any questions on altruism? Right, okay, I know, right, I went on the page, there's a big reason, right, but I want you guys to understand this stuff, okay? I mean, I want you, so you can construct an answer to that kind of question very concisely, right? You could say, you could start off with the answer, you could say altruism, altruistic behaviors involve in, let's say, populations of organisms when the benefit to the recipient times the degree of relationship, right, is greater than the cost in the model of kin selection, right? You know. Right? Or even before that, you can say altruism is defined as a behavior that benefits another individual at the cost to the performer. There are two basic models of altruism, kin selection and reciprocal altruism. In kin selection, B times R has to be greater than C, where B is this, R is this, C is this. Okay. The other model, reciprocal altruism, is when the performer is altruistic to another individual in the population under the assumption that, you can say when the tables are turned, the other individual will be altruistic, right? In this model, altruistic behaviors are better predicted by reciprocation than by degree of relation. Something like that. There's like 4 sentences, right? That really kind of gets the information. Yeah. All right. Everybody done in the past? All right, in the past, here's another one. I know we didn't talk too long about this, but let's sit on this for a little bit too. The same lecture, a little bit later, I like sexual selection. Sexual selection is really cool, right? Okay. Again, like altruism, we had 2 types, right? Kin and reciprocal, right? Kin selection, reciprocal altruism. All right, in sexual selection, we have 2 different models too, 2 basic models, okay? All right, so what is sexual selection? In an evolutionary context, we say sexual selection is non-random mating plus natural selection, right? So you could say sexual selection is when organisms select, let's say, partners, right? Mates, reproductive mates, based off of phenotypes, right? Based off of some phenotype. So 2 different models. What were the 2 models? So in sexual selection. Sexual selection gives rise to, what did I say, secondary sex characteristics, right? Sexual selection gives rise to secondary sex characteristics. How would you define a secondary sex characteristic?
What's on the outside?
Let's go.
What's on the outside, so not like gonads or anything, but like a display.
Right, so not gonads, what did you say? Yeah, so not gonads, right? So it's any adaptation, any phenotype, right, that is not directly producing gonads, right? Gametes, not directly producing gametes, right? Gonads would be primary, because they're producing the gamete, they're primary sex organs, right? Secondary sex organs, secondary sex characteristics are those that are involved in sex and reproduction, but aren't making gametes, right? Okay, so 2 models. What are the 2 models? Somebody said peacocks. Peacocks are a classic example of what model?
Intra?
No. Mate.
Oh.
If you're going through non-random mating, what does that mean? You're doing what? You're selecting, or you're choosing the mate, right? So the first model is called mate choice, right? Mate choice. So that is the peacock example, right? Classic example of mate choice. Okay. So describe describe mate choice, describe the peacock model.
Like they have a lot of feathers and they don't have any disease and they're healthy enough to like gather food and be able to make this beautiful pattern.
Correct, yes, right, exactly, yeah. Yes, so in the peacock model, males, so they're sexually dimorphic, right? Males grow a train, right, of tail feathers. Isn't that same terminology, or what do they use? Don't the brides and weddings have that long, they call that a train too? What do they call? I think it's the similar terminology, right? Yeah, they have the veil comes down, right? Yeah, so the train of feathers, right? Very large tail feathers, right? Okay, all right. Okay, so what does that do? The male displays. Males display in this model. It can be backwards. It's reversed. There are models where there are examples of mate choice where females display for males, but most commonly it's males display for females, right? So the peacock displays, right, and the females choose, right? You have choosy females, and now you ask the question, you know, why are males investing in this costly, right, train of feathers? It's exactly as she described, right? It's what we say is an honest indicator of fitness, right? It's something that the male can't fake, right? You can't fake your tail feathers, right? If you're sick, if you're riddled with intestinal parasites, if you don't know how to forage in your environment, right? If you have bad genetics, if you have a genetic, mutation that's messing it up, if you have a poor immune system, which has a genetic underlying as well, right? All that stuff, right? You can't grow these and invest all this extra energy, right, into these tail feathers, right? And so the female can choose amongst the males which one has the highest fitness, right? Based off of, in that example specifically, the number of isomes, which is how many feathers the animal has, right? So it's an honest indicator of fitness. So for males, what does that represent? The adaptation of the train of feathers, what does it represent? It represents a survival cost, right? It's a cost to their individual probability of survival, but it's a what gain? A reproductive gain, right? So what is fitness? Fitness is a measure of the organism's ability to survive and reproduce in its environment, right? So it's taking a survival hit, but it's gaining more of a reproductive benefit, right? So you still have to have the benefit outweigh the cost. There is a cost, there's always a cost, right? But the benefit has to be great. All right, so that's the idea with mate choice. Okay, what's the other one? One male looks at the other male and says, "Come at me, bro."
Interspecies competition. Sexual.
Not species, because it's within a species.
Okay.
Yeah. Intra-sexual competition. So what does that mean? Intra is within, sexual, a single sex, right? So within a sex. Competition, we know what competition is, right? So that's males competing with males. It can also be females competing with females. Again, the most common examples of mate choice are males display, females are choosy, right, amongst the males. And then the most common a very common example, especially in mammals, of intrasexual selection is males fighting with males, right? Okay, so intrasexual selection, we see males fight with males for what? Yeah, to take control of either the group of females, either the group of females could be the resource, females can be the resource, okay? Or what? Or they're taking control of what? Yeah, another resource that females require, right? It's what they require. So, classic examples are water, right? Like, again, I told you zebras, bighorn sheep do it in the mountains here, right, in western United States, right, there'll be a watering hole, right, or a natural spring, what do they call those? It's not, I keep thinking math for some reason, not Euclid, it's called artesian well, right, artesian springs. When water comes out, like comes up and bubbles out of the rocks and stuff like that, and they form little water pools, yeah, right? So the male will fight off all the other males during the reproductive season, and he controls the watering hole, right? So the male hangs out at the watering hole, fights off all the other males, so then when the female herd comes to drink from the watering hole, he's the only one there, right? So he gets reproductive access. The other classic example I told you guys, the elephant seals, right? Males are huge. They fight off other males, they control the beach, right? Females need the beach, full stop. That's it, they have to use the beach, right? So if he's the only male, well, there you go, right? Okay, so fight off other males, the dominant male gains access, right, to the females in this system. Does that maximize female fitness? And the answer is, no, it's not. It's not the optimal female strategy. And so in those types of models specifically, it's that females, they tolerate it because they have to, right? And because the other option is have no reproductive fitness, right? And that's not gonna be favored by natural selection, right?
How about the lions?
That's also male, yeah, but there's more to that, the lion example, right? Yeah. So the lion.
Shows the territory, right?
Yeah, so the female, the pride, right, of females, they're the ones that do all the work. Yeah, they're the ones that have the territory, they're the ones that hunt. But males still fight with other males, right? To gain access and dominance to the pride, right? So there's one male per pride, he gains reproductive rights. Now, there's a female investment too, right? Like there's the females don't want multiple males, right? Because what do we know that the big male does? The big male comes in and he kills off all the offspring, right? I mean, the female doesn't want that. That's gonna just be a reproductive hit. Yeah.
For the first one question, for like altruism and like if there's sexual selection, do you have to give an example of each one?
Examples help. You can describe it without an example, but I think
Okay.
examples.
Because like if
examples
you
help.
have to memorize the example.
You don't have to memorize my examples.
Okay.
No.
You have to explain how.
You have to explain it, yeah. If you can use an example to help explain, I would think an example would help, right? But no, if you were gonna give me an example of, let's say, intersexual competition, you don't have to tell me about elephant seals, right? You actually don't even have to tell me about any of these people if you explain it correctly. But, you know, another classic examples of that, specifically intersexual competition would be the evolution of armaments, right? So again, like you see the horns on the ibex back there were an example.